Oh, hey, buddy, it's your old pal Scott, and this is Let's Talk Tabletop. Now, this is a touchy subject, but does canon matter? Let's dive into it. I'm going to ask you to watch the entire video and listen to everything I have to say because I would like to take a middle of the road, very rational look at this, not biased in one way or the other. Well, first of all, what is canon? I'm not trying to give you the kindergarten version of it, but what I'm saying is what really is canon and what purpose is it supposed to serve? Well, in order to get people invested in your story has to be believable. It doesn't matter whether or not it's the setting for games such as Warhammer. It doesn't matter if it's a movie series like Star Wars or a TV series like Star Trek. You need consistency and believability in your story. Consistency is how you get believability, right? If you're doing Star Trek and all of a sudden it's all about a park full of dinosaurs, that's going to throw people off because it's not consistent, right? And then you start losing the suspension of disbelief in your audience, and they may not stick around because it seems kind of goofy, right? The reason why canon is important is because you need people invested in it, and this background needs to be believable. If you say this is a Denob class runabout, and then later on as the show producers, you call this a Clarion class runabout, well, people are going to go, whoa, 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 I thought that was a Denob. Do you not know what class of shuttle this is? Like, are you just making stuff up on the spot? Things like that, right? And so you need to make sure that if that's a Denob class shuttlecraft in season 1, it's still a Denob class shuttlecraft in season 7. You just have to make sure that's the case. Once you get people invested in your intellectual property, whether it's TV, movies, games, whatever, then you are kind of bound to that. In other words, if you start being inconsistent, people will drop out. So now anything new that you write in a TV show, movie, whatever, is going to be restrained by everything that has come before it. And sometimes that can get really, really complicated for writers and creators. You know, you want to suddenly introduce a new race into Star Trek. And in this new series, they're a prominent species. Well, where have they been all these other decades? Why have we not seen them? You're going to have to explain why what you're adding makes sense in the lore. And you're going to have to do that with all the retcons of Star Wars and things like that as well. Or Warhammer with the female custodies. You're going to have to explain that. Obviously, canon is very important to a lot of people because they've invested a lot of time and effort into these things. But hold on. That's not the end of this conversation. Hey, today's brought to you by my new book, Brutal Epic. It's an expansion on the Brutality Skirmish Wargame rules. It's 6mm epic scale. It's also 28mm superhero scale. And you use all your miniatures that you want to. So go check that out at brutalityskirmishwargame.com. Anyway, the big but to this is that lore can change. But, a but on top of a but, lore can change over time, and it probably should change over time. But you have to still make it make sense, okay? If you're going to try to tell me that after 50 years of Star Trek, the Klingons are a pacifistic race, and you're a new showrunner and you just make a new TV show and the Klingons are all pacifistic, and you claim they've always been pacifistic, we're gonna have a problem because they're known as a warrior race and very proud and all of that. Now, if somehow, some way, you could actually make that fit into the established canon, then okay, really, nobody can really argue too much about that. Yes, it's out of the way and it's out of their lane, what we're used to, but it's not going to be as detrimental or make people as angry if you actually did explain that. I don't know how you'd explain that, but if you were able to do that, that would make sense, right? Same thing with any changes to the Acolyte and the Jedi history and the lore and all of that. As long as you make it make sense in the established canon, then Okay, I mean, there's some goofy stuff in the established canon of 40K, D&D, Star Trek, Star Wars. They all have goofy stuff. Everyone remembers the episode where Janeway and Tom Paris turned into giant salamanders, and we hate that episode. Okay? So not everything's roses in canon. Some things we wish did not happen. But my point is that you have to respect the canon if you want to not anger your customers. The canon is something they've invested in and matters a lot to them. So you're going to have to work in it and around it. Okay? You can't change it drastically. There are good ways to do this and bad ways to do this. I feel like the recent change in the custodies for Warhammer 40K and just saying, oh, there's always been women in it. To my knowledge, there has not always been women in the custodies. Now, there's Sisters of Silence and things like that, but that's a bad retcon, you understand? To just say Klingons have always been pacifistic. Oh, there's always women in custodies. Well, have there, though? Because I've got TVs and movies showing me Klingons violent. I've got decades of books claiming the custodies are a brotherhood. I don't know. Now, if you wanted to add women to the custodies, you need to progress the storyline and introduce them in a natural and believable way. Don't say there always have been females when there's no proof of that. You need to actually introduce them and say, oh, here's the new chamber of custodies and they are women, whatever. Now, I understand that's a very muddy topic because of the whole transhuman physiology stuff, you know, where they're adding all the gene seeds and all of that. There's more to that argument than just that. But if they could, my point is, if they could come up with a good reason why it's being changed, a good portion of the people would not be so angry about it. They'd kind of take it in stride. Now, if you said Primaris Marines always existed, you're going to have the same problem. Fundamentally, it's not really a woman-man thing. It really is you're changing the lore and you're doing it sloppily, right? If they tried to say, oh, the Primaris have always been here since the original founding, you'd be like, no, they haven't. But what they did is they progressed the storyline and they introduced them as a new thing because they are a new thing, right? So, there are good ways and bad ways to do this. I personally believe that the lore does hold great importance in an intellectual property because if you don't have lore, what do you have, right? If all of a sudden you claim there's no lightsabers in Star Wars, well, then what do you have? If there's no phasers or warp drives in Star Trek, what do you have? Like literally the only thing you have in your intellectual property is the canon. Your intellectual property is the canon. If I look and see the Starship Enterprise, canonically that's a Federation ship. If you suddenly tell me it's Romulan, I'm confused and don't know where you're coming from, right? So, the problem is that when lore is changed sloppily and it does not respect the existing canon, that's when the most reasonable people get upset, regardless of politics or anything like that. You need to respect the lore. It can be changed, it can be updated, it can be altered, but you still have to work within the confines of what has been established. And if you can do that, if you're a good enough writer and you're creative enough and you've got good ideas, then people will kind of go along with it for the most part. Obviously, there's no making everybody happy, and I'm sure by now most people have probably clicked out of this video, not listened to the rest of it, and just was angrily typing in the comment section, probably. But the point is, if you're looking at it objectively, everybody, in my opinion, would have to agree that canon is important. But canon is open to change. But it needs to be changed in a respectful manner to the existing canon. If you don't have canon, you have nothing as an intellectual property. The names, the factions, the places, the events, all of those are part of canon. If you just crap all over that, then you have nothing. If Spider-Man shoots webs one day, and then he flies the next, and then he's got flame powers in the next issue, there's no canon there. Like, there just isn't. So, for those of you who say canon doesn't matter, blah, 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 It certainly does. And for those of you who say Canon can't change and it shouldn't be changed, I don't know about that. If it's done well and it's done respectful, it can be changed. It can be updated. It can be whatever. You have to respect the lore. So let me know your opinion of this. Hopefully, I haven't made anybody angry. This is just a objective look at it. Thank you to all my beautiful, sexy, good-smelling Patreon patrons. They are listed right now, and I appreciate each and every one of you. I'll see you next week.